Introduction today of our speaker, Cheryl Thole, who's a senior research associate here at the Center for Urban Transportation Research, but is also with the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute. While at the center, she's progressively gained experience in the areas of bus rapid transit, land use, transportation, and paratransit. In addition to researching the relationship between BRT and land use, Ms. Thole is currently responsible for many clearinghouse activities of the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute, including the BRT newsletter and the NBRTI website. She has also worked on evaluations for Eugene's MX system, the Oakland's Rapid, and the LA's Orange Line. She's researched land use policies and practices in relation to transit and bus rapid transit, and has visited many bus rapid transit systems in the U.S. and other countries. So with that, let me turn it over to Cheryl, and it's all yours, Cheryl.
Okay, great. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for coming in and participating. I'm excited that there's such a large number of people who are joining the webinar for the first time. And as Phil said, I hope you join us again following the new year, which is right around the corner. So this is going to be very exciting. Everyone's always excited about bus rapid transit. So there's going to be a couple little efforts that I'm going to discuss, meaning two, that we've put forward here at the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute. But before I get started in presenting some of that information to you, I just wanted to ask a question, a polling question. So I'm more familiar with your familiarity with bus rapid transit, so we can get a good idea as to where we should go with this and how detailed of information I should provide. So it's looking like everyone has a relative understanding of BRT. No one here is wondering what BRT is, unless they don't want to admit it. It's anonymous. Just kidding. Okay, so with the 66%, I think we're pretty good with that. And then those who are somewhat familiar, I hope that this presentation today will give you a little more information, and glad that you're logging in, trying to learn more about the mode. So if I'm going to go ahead and get started with this one, the first research effort, I want to give you a little background on it. The who in this presentation is kind of being prepared to let people know the demographics of riders of bus rapid transit systems, a couple of them, or a few here in the U.S. The reason why we completed a couple of onboard survey analyses was we were asked by the Federal Transit Administration to conduct a couple of evaluations of the BRT systems that are in operation to try and gauge their success rate or get better understanding as to how they're in operation, their performance measures, etc. But as part of that effort, we went ahead and conducted some onboard evaluations as well to try and better understand the demographics of the riders. Part of the reason for that being is the TCRP report, the Census 63, has found that over 60% of transit agencies that distribute onboard surveys believe that they obtain better information in regard to accuracy, reliability, and detail from their respondents compared to other methodologies. And of course that makes sense because they're going direct to the source. So in using that, it kind of helped build upon the importance of us to include these onboard surveys in our evaluations that we conducted. So the evaluations that we included in, or the onboard surveys included in our evaluations were of AC Transit San Pablo Rapid, which is also known as the 72R, or just simply the Rapid. And that's located out in Oakland, California. The main transit districts, Emerald Express along the Franklin Corridor, which is a 4-mile route, because we only looked at the first phase at the time when we conducted the evaluation, as that was the only one that was in operation. And that's located in Eugene, Oregon. And we also looked at Los Angeles's Metro Orange Line, which is a 14-mile route on its own dedicated right-of-way. And the onboard survey analyses that we completed, just to give you a timeline, were conducted in 2004, 2007, and 2009, respectively. So we had that information there and tried to propose information combined together and look at that as compared to how it looks with the American Public Transportation Association survey analysis that they completed. APTA completed this information. They compiled all the information from over 150 transit agencies in the United States, and they completed this analysis in 2007. And although their data is representative years from 2000 to 2005, it serves as an anecdotal benchmark for the comparison of national trends that we can look at for each BRT route. Actually, I'm going back a little bit because I want to give you a little background too, instead of jumping the gun, just so everyone is familiar with how we conducted the surveys. Just our methodologies that we went about. MBRTI, we distribute the onboard surveys to collect the data on demographics, and the dates of the surveys when we did the distribution were set to capture midweek data. We completed them in both the afternoons and the evenings, and over a 2-day period, the route was surveyed once for its entire service span. So the survey results do represent 1 weekday of service. APTA's survey, I think it's important that you understand how they went about providing their analysis. In 2007, as I mentioned, they had their analysis completed, and they looked at 150 onboard vehicle passenger surveys, once again, between the years of 2000 to 2005. And the ones that they looked at were, when combined, they carry over about 60% of all transit trips made in the United States. And those survey results were published, were gathered from ones that were published on the internet and from responses by members of APTA who sent a letter in, who responded to the letter that APTA sent out requesting information regarding their newest available survey results. When they were looking at it, they break it down into different types of modes. They look at rail modes and roadway modes, which is how we're going to present some of the data here today. Rail modes that they had include most of the fixed guideway modes, such as commuter rail, heavy rail, light rail, automated guideway transit, and ferry boat. And the roadway modes include motor bus and demand response paratransit. Some of you may be wondering, where is the BRT or where is trolley bus? Even though those are often referred to as fixed guideway modes in the industry, APTA did not include them as railway modes in the analysis. The reason for this being especially for BRT is historically transit agencies did not separate operating data of these two modes from the conventional bus service. So that's one of the things that is changing now. Just as a side note, if you are going to be looking at any data in the National Transit Database, you'll notice that efforts are being put forward to have BRT separated out from the conventional bus service and operation. So now the exciting stuff is happening. Now that I gave you the background, which I know you all were so excited to hear. Just talking about the demographics. So according to the data presented by APTA, about 42% of transit trips on roadway modes are made by males, while 58% are made by females. The survey results that we conducted, however, show a larger percent of male passengers completed the transit trips along each BRT route. And as you can see, about 48% on the MX, 52% on the Rapid, and 53% on the Orange line. It is more similar to those reported for the rail modes as opposed to the roadway. And then we also looked at age to try and understand those groupings accessing the transit. Among the categories that we have for each of the three systems, the BRT systems, as shown here on the slide, they're all relatively the same in regard to age. The Rapid has the largest difference in riders under the age of 18, with about 16% of its ridership making up that one particular category. I'm trying to point it out with the little clicker. While only 9.72% make up the MX ridership and 7.89 make up the other for those under the age of 18. So the Rapid does have a larger group there under that age. When we're looking at those in comparison to what's happening industry-wide, the Orange Line and the MX have a smaller percentage for trips by individuals under the age of 18 than APTA's analysis. And also the Rapid experienced a greater percentage of young riders than was commonly experienced at the transit agencies in the U.S. too, as we just looked at. The percentages reported along the onboard surveys for the BRT routes, they closely mimicked those that were experienced in the industry. Those numbers were in that 24 or 25 to 34 age bracket. And we also saw that on the BRT routes, a very small percentage of individuals, and that was less than 4, reported being 65 years older than the percent value reported industry-wide, which was 7.4. We also asked questions regarding the occupation of riders, and as you can see, we do have both the Orange Line here and the MX, but you'll notice the Rapid was missing, as this question was not included in the survey instrument. And there's some categories where rail modes and roadway modes in the APTA analysis were combined: the student, K through 12, and college student. So though those can't necessarily be, you can't break it down into the student or K through 12, it just still gives that idea. The same happens for below, or employed for pay outside the home and employed for pay at home. Those categories were added as well. What we were noticing is that the occupation status that was selected most frequently for both the BRT routes was employed for pay outside the home, as you can see here. And this may be attributed to the fact that there's a large number of employers located along each route. There are 2 large institutions along the MX, the University of Oregon and Sacred Heart Hospital, and the Central Business District in Oakland and other institutions are located along the Rapid route. Which the unfortunate thing of that is that we don't have that information there, but later on we'll talk a little bit more about where people are getting their trip purpose. Most of the Orange Line's commercial activity is clustered around its 2 termini, which is Warner Center to the west and North Hollywood neighborhood to the east. And North Hollywood is very close. It's just across the street from one of the stops on the Metro's Red Line, which is one of its subway routes. As expected, a lot of them were very closely related to what APTA was having, and what's the main purpose of your trip today. Sorry. Oh. Okay. I believe I'm not clicking on the right one. So my apologies. So when we were looking back up against the secondly most frequently category that was selected by writers was on the MX, survey respondents were students, and they had the opportunity to choose either K through 12 and college student. The Orange Line survey instrument did not break this down and only had student as a designation, whereas they had 29% of the respondents selecting this category, while on the MX we had 12.1 selecting K through 12 and 26.2 selecting college students, which combined is the equivalent to about 38%. And again, this is linking it back along to what I had mentioned previously. It's most likely due to both routes operating within close proximity to college campuses. In Los Angeles, they had stations at both the Los Angeles Pierce Community College, which has this student population of about 20,000 each semester, and they also have a Valley College, which is another community college as well, with an enrollment that's generally less than about 20,000 too. I think it's about 18,000. And as previously mentioned, the University of Oregon, which is along the MX, has about an enrollment of 24,000 students. So as compared to the percentages reported by APTA, the Orange Line and the MX do experience a greater number of trips made by students. Both the rail and roadway transit modes report much smaller percentages for trips among students, with 8.6% and 11.9% respectively. The BRT routes also had a greater percentage of trips made by homemakers than for APTA results, and the number of trips that were also made by unemployed persons was greater on the BRT routes. If we go down toward the employed for pay outside the home, we will notice that the national data show an overwhelming proportion of trips on railway modes are made by riders who are employed at approximately 80%, right here. And the roadway modes experience the highest percentage in this category as well, however, that is lower at 67.6%. Although they are much higher than those respondents on the BRT routes, the trend is analogous when looking at the most frequently selected category in comparison to all those that are listed above. The vehicle ownership was another thing that was asked and included in the onboard surveys, just because it's also important to kind of, although it's not a definitive answer, it helps give an idea as to how individuals depend on transit, if they are transit dependent, if they may be choice riders. So when we were looking at this, we found that those that are making use of the BRT system that have no vehicle available in their household they made up the largest group of each of the BRT systems, with 59.7% on the MX, 35.4% on the Rapid, and 60.8% on the Orange Line. While the majority of the riders have no motor vehicle available, riders on the Rapid represent a more even distribution of vehicle ownership, however, in comparison, as you can see here, in comparison to what the MX is showing and the Orange Line. The APTA analysis over to the right, the rail modes and the roadway modes, showed that those who are on rail modes are more likely to have a vehicle than those on the roadway modes. As a whole, when you're looking at the big picture here, we can see that vehicle ownership in the households of transit riders among the three BRT systems is most similar to the roadway modes than the rail modes. And it's especially true among those, again, reporting no vehicle ownership. And this may suggest that along those particular corridors in which the BRT was implemented, there's a high percentage of transit-dependent riders. Among the households with the one vehicle, however, the MX and the Orange Line are more closely aligned to the transit riders of the rail modes. We looked at income also, and again, this is one of those, especially when you have a lot of students that are reporting on these surveys, as we have found with each of the systems. It's a little questionable as to how the answers are coming across, but again, it can serve as a little guideline for us. When we're looking at the BRT trips, we found that more than 48% of the BRT trips on the MX and the Orange Line were made by passengers with an annual household income of less than $15,000. That's greater than the 26% reported by APTA among the roadway modes, and even higher than the 10% for rail modes. and I don't have the table here for this information, but it lends itself better to have it presented in this format. We also found that 12.4% of those on the orange line are closely aligned to rail modes in the category of 15,000 to about 25,000 income bracket. And for rail modes, we found that approximately 50% of transit trips are made by passengers living in households with income of 50,000 or more. When it comes down to roadway modes, we found that APTA found that that percentage is about half the amount. And when looking at them further, when bringing BRT into the mix of that 50,000 annual income or more, we found that less than 14% of the trips on the MX, approximately 17% on the Rapid, and around 20% of the riders on the orange line were in that category. So it is lower than what the national trends are. In the surveys, we also wanted to include some information regarding trip purpose and some other categories related in this to understand travel behaviors. So while some of the questions kind of are not specifically related to demographics per se, it does lend itself to understanding what the behaviors and what our transit riders are doing out there. So the questions that we did include were trip purpose, reason for riding the bus, how the trip was previously made before the implementation of the BRT service. We also looked at how many days per week the rider uses transit services to understand whether or not these people who are accessing the service are familiar with transit, if they have a high comfort level. And also just wondering how long, not even just how many days a week do they access it, but how long have they been using transit. The data included in the analysis that we looked at from APTA, we were able to include a couple in regard to trip purpose, the number of days a week transit is used, and the length of time transit users have been riding transit. So that allowed for some comparisons to be completed with the data that we collected on our onboard surveys. So when looking at the trip purpose, we have some color on our slides now. Survey participants, they were asked what exactly the trip purpose was for, whether it was for work, shopping, school, leisure activities such as visiting friends and family, job seeking, which as you will note there, it's not a mistake. Job seeking, the MX, or I'm sorry, the AC, the red bar, the AC Transit Rapid was not, did not have that as an option on their survey. Also health and medical trips, and then of course there's the other category, which who knows what that may include, but they were all asked to select what was their trip purpose, and found that about 50% of the riders in the orange line and 35% of riders in the MX designated work as their trip purpose. And among the 3 BRT routes, it was the most frequently selected one there. As you can see, that's pretty apparent in the bar graph. Making use of the BRT system as a means for traveling to school was the second largest response group, which previously we've mentioned this more than once, but once again, that's probably because of being in close proximity to the academic institutions along the routes. Similarly, the 72R, the Rapid, and AC Transit Rapid, the red one, it also operates within 3/4 of a mile of University of Berkeley, which has a higher student enrollment than the previous academic institutions that have been mentioned before, with about, I think it's about 35,000, and it has the route has a northern terminus at Contra Costa Community College as well. Over 10% of the riders of each route selected leisure activities as their trip purpose. So that's showing pretty high amount here. So it's much greater than the job seeking or the health or medical or shopping. So leisure activities is always a nice positive to see noted in survey analyses, because it shows that people aren't just using it for specifically work, they're comfortable using it for other activities as well. When you look at the trip purpose for the railway modes and the roadway modes that we have here, you can see that over 70%, which is the large blue piece of the pie, on the railway modes are work-related. And I'm assuming that's very clear on your monitors, but we have the blues work, the red is school, that greenish, if you're green, if you think that's green, social activities, purple is the shopping, the lighter blue is the medical, the other is orange, and then the very light blue is personal business. So once again, when looking at them in the industry, about 70% of the transit trips on rail modes are work-related. When you look over at the roadway modes, you have about 52% are designated as being work trips for each of the trips that are made on or surveyed on board. The majority of the trips being taken for work purposes are similar to the percentages on the BRT as previously noted. That trend, like once up above, much higher, of course, than the rest of those options. The school trip data is more closely aligned with this is the school here for roadway, for the roadway modes, whereas the percent of social trips that we have here is more analogous to those that are shown for the BRT. So you can see these trends back over here. We're also wondering different reasons for those that are riding the BRT. Sometimes this gives a little insight as to, once again, you know, if people are using it as because they are transit dependent, or they are doing it as a choice, as being a choice rider. The largest percentage of survey participants for each BRT systems responded that they either do not drive or no car is available to them. And that accounted for 45% on the Rapid, 35 on the MX, and 28 on the Orange Line. The second most frequently selected response was that the trip was more convenient than other means of transportation. Riders were also asked for each of the BRT systems how they previously had made the trip prior to riding on the BRT route. The overwhelming response among those on the Rapid and the MX was to make use of another transit route, accounting for 62% right here on the Rapid, and 57.6% on the MX. The number is much different than the other two for the Orange Line. That difference can be explained when looking at those who previously did not make the trip. Before the Orange Line was in operation, that particular route was non-existent. It wasn't replacing another service that was already in operation, as opposed to the Rapid and the MX. The Rapid actually replaced a limited stop service that they previously had. They called it the 72L. The MX replaced a conventional Route 11 service, at least along that first section of the 4-mile corridor previous to the implementation of their second phase that continued on. But once again, the Orange Line was a newly constructed route that ran parallel to a highway over on the side. So that could explain where that large differentiation comes from. Sorry, I'm having laptop issues with clicking on them. When we're looking here at the days per week, we're able to bring in some comparisons once back with APTA, with the information that they found, because these were questions that they included in their survey analysis. As you can see, though, the Rapid, we don't have answers to that particular question, as that was not included in the survey instrument at the time. So the majority of survey participants responded that their use of transit was 5 or more days per week, which shows that people are familiar with transit, which we like, right? On the orange line, the most frequently selected response, 30.9%, was 5 or more days per week as well. It's closely aligned here with the railways and the roadway modes, with the 34.6 and the 36% on the roadway. We also then asked not only the days per week, but the length of time that individuals were had used and accessed transit. And I will be able to compare this with you on the next slide is too, with showing you with some industry information. However, they're not directly comparable as the categories were not broken down in the same situation. So just looking at the Rapid and the MX, we can see that most riders are very familiar and have been using transit for a significant amount of time, with more than 5 years taking up the big portion, 46, almost 47% on the Rapid, almost 34% on the MX, and as you can see, it continues on if you go backward on that one. So this is what Apta's analysis came up with, and as you can see here, it's also very similar. The trend, the longer the length of time, the greater the results were for particular categories. So all these surveyed riders are generally pretty familiar with transit. Of course, we have those who are in the 1 month category. That's very exciting to have some new individuals. Well, after we did, this is kind of moving along from, it's not, it's in the same efforts that we put forward with the survey instruments, but this isn't asking demographic questions and it's not asking travel behaviors, but we also did ask those who are riding on the systems, the BRT systems themselves, what they thought of different aspects of BRT service. So the reason for this being is it can provide some transit agencies with useful information to satisfy their patrons. The mean scores that they had were of 1 to 5, with 1 being very poor and 5 being very good. And the BRT service, BRT routes received really high ratings for their service overall. I'm going to have 2 different slides because it's a table that I wanted to break up into 2 sections because there are a lot of different elements that we asked people to rate. So as you can see, we asked some performance questions such as hours of service, frequency of the service, dependability, travel time. So a lot of those questions were posed forward, all very high ratings. As you can see here, 4s, 3.8. We have the next one here, which deals operator courtesy, amenities provided at the stations, availability of bike racks, which is something that a lot of systems were very involved in including these, especially the MX and Eugene. It's a very bicycle-friendly community. But when we're trying to look at the different ratings that received the highest one, the Rapid had a mean score of 4.2, the MX of 4.1, and the orange line overall was a 4.5. The riders of the Rapid, they rated the following service elements the highest: the additional door in the middle of the bus, which allows for easier boarding and alighting. Also allows for faster travel times overall, although I don't know if the transit patrons really thought about the door allowing for that to happen. They also used newer vehicles. They used Van Hool's at the Rapid, so the low floor entrance onto the bus was something that was new for a lot of their transit patrons, and the ease of identifying the Rapid bus service. They did a really good job of incorporating their logos in both their stations and having that stations, the bus, having a pole around. They did a good marketing campaign with it. So they did a good job of providing that ease of identification. The other elements for that also ranked very high included travel time, service hours, and frequency. The elements that received the lowest ratings, although they were still very high at 3.9, were cost, seat availability, which I don't know if that's really a bad thing or a good thing. I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. Bus shelter cleanliness and bus shelter amenities. And with the MX, the highest ratings that they received were doors on both sides of the bus, which was they were used New Flyer vehicles, and these vehicles are the same ones that are used in Cleveland along the BRT corridor in operation there. The two of them went in together and helped design the vehicles, where both of them use the doors on both sides of the bus allow for some median stops that they have. So the reason for putting those in allowed for people to access it, especially in the contraflow lanes. Highest rating also on the MX includes the cost of riding the bus. However, at the time that the survey was conducted, the MX on the first phase was not currently charging riders to ride at the time. So that was one thing that could change. The survey elements that were receiving 4.2 or 4.3 rating included frequency, travel time, the availability of information at the stations, and the ease of identifying users, or identifying the services. Operator driving competence was also very high, and the additional door in the middle of the bus too, not just having doors on both sides. The orange line with that high score of 4.5 is higher than Metro's overall satisfaction rating of 4.2. And the highest mean score of 4.5 was for the additional door in the middle of the vehicle. So generally speaking, everyone likes having that additional door in the middle of the vehicle, which does allow for shorter dwell times and also allows for shorter overall travel times from end to end. So just to focus on a couple of conclusions from this data, couple areas in which the BRT system did not closely correlate with industry-wide data for railway and roadway modes. One would be gender. Income was another area in which they did not really directly correlate, with income among BRT riders being relatively similar across each of the three systems, but much different than those of the roadway and railway. In regard to age, we also found that the riders of each of the three surveyed routes, the BRT routes, are very similar to one another. On the MX and the orange line, the largest category that was selected, more frequently selected category actually, was the 18 to 24 age category, and it's also the second largest group to make up the Rapid at 22%. And again, that might be likely due to all the college academic institutions located along the routes. Looking at age industry-wide, it was found that they were very similar to the reported agencies, the percentages for the 25 to 34 age bracket, and it can be found that each of the BRT routes reported smaller percentages for those 65 or older. Some of the similarities that were found between the riders of the three BRT systems and riders of the roadway modes include vehicle access, the lack of availability of a car, except for among those who were reporting access to one vehicle in the home, and that the one vehicle per home was more similar to railway modes. But perhaps the most significant findings of the analysis is among the similarities between the three BRT systems and the roadway and railway modes in terms of the travel behaviors in regard to the access of transit use and the level of familiarity between that. The information found that the BRT riders are generally traditional users of transit and are familiar with the public mode of travel. So this could suggest that BRT systems, the implementation of them, have provided traditional users of transit with something that's more reliable, frequent, and faster than was previously accessed, and communities have invested in something that provides their patrons with a better mode of transit. When looking at the categories, once again, most frequently trip purpose, and that was very similar to the results reported by APTA for the nationwide data. And the use of transit among the BRT riders, such as the numbers of days per week, was very similar as well. So quickly, the what, just to let you know, this is a different effort that we're putting forward. It's an ongoing survey effort that we have been doing here at the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute. The effort originated in 2008. We currently have about 124 records, records being routes themselves, all of varying levels of activity, of systems that are either being planned, implemented, early planning, in operation, broken down, and we've asked transit agencies, we put out information there, asked them to complete a survey for us to provide us information that we're able to include in this database that we have to try and better understand what's happening and what some of the trends are here in the United States. So this agency survey is really useful. Right now it has about 23 states that are included in the data. This is what our instrument looks like. You have this one page here where, as you can see, the black icons indicate there are multiple routes in operation within that city. Green is something that's currently in operation. Blue being implemented. Yellow is being planned. And gray is the route is being considered. And just, I want to, even though it's not live, but if you were to click on one of the black icons here, like suppose I clicked on this one, it would expand to show you all the different routes that would then pop up, either those that are planning, those that are in operation, etc. Once again, if you click on one of the ones that are currently being implemented or operated, there's data that's associated with it. You'll have one of these popping up. I think they're called GUIs, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure what the technical term is. But you'll have one of those pop up, and then you can click on each individual thing, and it'll bring up more information, such as showing you a summary, a short little summary, route length, anticipated or current ridership, a lot of small little information, not getting into the nitty-gritty, but showing you some brief things that you can look at. Just to let you know, too, if you do go through here and if you are interested in getting this site, please feel free to email me at the end of this, and I'll be more than happy to share this information with you. You can access this data in an Excel file, which you would click that link right there, and you can download that, which is way more information than I'm sure a lot of people would like to know, but it's very interesting at least. So what we have right now in the database, we do have 63 routes that are in operation. We have 33 that are currently being planned, 12 that are in conceptual planning stages or communities are thinking about putting them in, 10 that are currently being implemented, which would include construction, and early planning, we have about 6 of them in those categories. Some of the questions that we asked to put data into this database are running way types. And although this, again, this is a survey, or it all depends on the amount of information that we receive from the transit agency, so it's not always going to be the same. That's why count is included in here. So we don't have a 100% response rate for all of our questions or categories. But to just give you some ideas, a large percentage of communities are either operating, planning, or constructing BRT systems that are going to be on mixed traffic. We do have a few that are going to be fully dedicated, with 20 selecting that response, which is great because it does allow for faster travel times and not having to deal with other traffic there. We also asked about station location, and this picture here is BMX in Eugene. Station location in the running way, either it be single-sided, if it would be median, double-sided, split, other, and as you can see, these are some of the counts that we have here, with single-sided being the most frequently selected. Not really sure what the other would be, but we did include that in our survey as well. And those are questions that we generally, once we get those selected, we'll follow up with the transit agencies themselves and ask them for some anecdotal information to add to our information that we can look at and provide to individuals who are interested. But we do have a couple of those who are looking at double-sided with a 25 count. That's pretty significant. Station elements. We have asked questions about that, what people include, parking lots, level boarding, real-time information, and off-board fare collection. Real-time information and level boarding have some high percentages that were selected. Level boarding and the off-board fare collection, which we're going to talk a little bit about next, just briefly. Both of those allow for faster travel times. Technologies used. We have the AVL. Also, we have APCs, which a lot of transit agencies, I'm sure you're aware of as well. A lot of them are collecting a lot of this APC data, but don't necessarily know what that data can do for them. So a lot of transit agencies already have that in place as we speak. So putting this into the BRT system isn't necessarily new per se. Also have transit signal priority, which allows for faster travel times through the intersections, and cameras on vehicles and stops and stations allows for people to feel a little more safer when they're traveling the route. So just the last discussion, just information to provide some data, and of course our database once again has a lot more information than what I've talked about here, but I just want to give you a little idea as to what some of those in the communities throughout the U.S. that are looking at BRT, what they're implementing is. So here's fare payment, and as some of us may know, about a quarter of end-to-end travel time is spent at stations in conventional bus service. And if you have off-board fare collection or proof of payment or something of the sort, it can allow for shorter overall travel time, which of course allows for the rapid and bus rapid transit to occur. So for those that are still using the onboard fare box or plan to use it, with the 33, the almost 34% there, that may not necessarily, it may hinder their travel times, or it just may not increase the speed. But those who are implementing proof of payment and ticket vending machines, we do have some large percentages that are looking at that too. And of course, this also depends on what kind of financial situations each community's in, and whether or not they're able to incorporate these types of technologies and fare payment methods as well. So actually, that was the conclusion of the information from the database that I'm presenting to you today. But like I had mentioned previously, there is a lot more data in that database, which we are more than happy to share with you. We'd like that information to be out there for people to use, access, and get some good ideas on. Just if they're looking to implement some systems in their own community as well, and just understand what other agencies are doing. So, are there any questions?
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes, we have a couple questions that have already come in, but as a reminder, before I get to those, on your screen is how to ask a question. In the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you see the Q&A. Click the Q&A, type in your question in the box here, and click the word ask, and that will submit it to us. The first question says, it looks like the Orange Line versus the MX rider occupations are non-exclusive. Is that right? It looks like the MX also adds up to more than 100%.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. With that one, that's not something I failed to mention when we were talking about that. They, on the survey instrument for the MX, they were able to select more than one, whereas on the Orange Line, that was not the case.
Okay. Another part of this question is, what is proof of payment versus TVM?
Generally, it's sometimes the same, but you may have a lot of different communities have employed different individuals to come along and jump onto a vehicle at certain points along the corridor and go along and ask individuals to show their proof of payment. TVM or ticket vending machine is something where someone actually would buy something specifically from the machine itself. So they're sometimes the same thing or closely linked, but other times it could just be another method of people have paid previously in another format, and they just may have a pass or something of the sort.
All right. And I guess it was kind of related to the income-related question. Have you filtered the household income for those who self-identify as students, or have you removed the unemployed income from the average to prevent skewing?
No, yes, those have not been removed, and that was one of the things that I had mentioned is it's difficult when you have the students that are in there, especially since we have such a large number of students that are riding the system. And that is something that with the final report, we are planning on grabbing that data out and looking at it from that sense, as we did have such a high percentage of students accessing the routes, all 3 routes actually.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. Another question is, what is the split station location?
The split, a lot of people were looking at splits and looking at the medians. Split would be where you would use both sides of the station, whereas the median would just be one side of the station where you would have like a contraflow lane. And the bus would, the MX actually uses this where they have the bus that would use the station. It's only access on one side. It's not on both sides. It's not an egress and access on both sides of the station. It's just on one side.
And thank you. And if, given BRTs continuing to evolve, are there particular lessons that have been learned from the earlier BRT systems that have maybe perhaps changed the way the later BRT systems have operated?
Oh, well, there are always lessons that are coming out. Initially a lot of data started being collected and compiled and put into a huge document that we have here at the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute. We completed for the Federal Transit Administration. It's the characteristics of bus rapid transit. And it's anything and everything that you would ever want to know about BRT. It has not been updated, though, since 2009, so there are a lot more newer systems that are out there in operation or just being planned and built. However, it does give a good background and foundation for understanding and looking at some of the BRT systems that have already been put into place and in operation, not just only here in the United States, but worldwide as well. There's some examples in other countries. When it comes to lessons that were learned, I think most of them weren't necessarily in terms of operations as much as they were kind of anecdotal thoughts about, implementing the service, making sure that the marketing and the branding was done well to allow for different people in the community to understand what the service was. A lot of times communities, in Eugene, it was one of the concerns, and Oakland was another one where local business owners along the routes were concerned about, having these stations put in front of their office space, and that being detrimental to them. Generally speaking, from what we've heard from the transit agencies, is after the routes have been in operation, the concerns of the business owners have been appeased. They're not as worried about that. But once again, when it comes to performance measures, those necessarily haven't been hasn't been a lot of lessons learned per se that's applicable across the board for other agencies, which is unfortunate maybe, but that also could be a sign that some things have worked really well.
Okay, Carol. Cheryl, the last kind of question, somebody said they were having trouble finding your clickable map of inventory of the BRT systems. I brought up the MBRTI website. They can't necessarily follow where you're clicking, but I thought you could tell them.
Oh, where to go for that link?
Yes.
Yes. Actually, if I can send you that link once we get, it's a longer address, so if I can send you that link once we're off, is that possible then, and we can forward that along to everyone?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Or does that not work?
Yeah, no, we can do that. Anyway, that we can do that. We'll send out the full link. So with that, I'd like to thank Cheryl for her presentation, and I'd like to wish you all a happy holiday. We hope you take a few minutes to complete an evaluation, tell us what you thought about today's session, maybe even suggest future sessions as we put together the 2014 CUTR Webcast series. So on behalf of the Center for Urban Transportation Research, we wish you a good day and a happy new year. Thank you.